The authorities seized my home, worth $1 million, all because I refused to bend to my son-in-law, a cocky Wall Street scammer. When they changed the locks and told me, "Go live in a shelter, Grandpa," I called 911. What happened next left them terrified. Before we continue, please subscribe and share where you're watching from in the comments. At exactly 2 p.m. on July 1st, just as Emily promised, the doorbell rang. I set my coffee mug down and limped to the door, my old Vietnam injury flaring up in the summer heat. Through the peephole, I spotted my daughter's perfectly styled blonde hair and her husband Mark's expensive suit gleaming under the Cleveland sun. "Dad." Emily's voice carried that forced cheer I'd come to recognize over the years. She hugged me tightly, the scent of her designer perfume overpowering the familiar smell of my aftershave. Mark stepped forward, flashing a polished Wall Street smile and extending a manicured hand. "Robert, good to see you again." I gripped his hand firmly, noting his attempt to assert dominance. At 75, I may be slower, but my grip still held the strength of decades spent in construction before the war stole even that from me. Come in," I said, stepping aside. "I've got iced tea in the kitchen." They settled into my living room like they owned the place. Mark's eyes roamed, taking stock of my modest furniture, photos of my late wife Martha on the mantel, and a small shadow box filled with military medals. "Dad, the house looks—" Emily hesitated, searching for the right words. "It looks exactly the same. Why would I change it? Your mother picked most of this furniture, still does its job." Mark leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Actually, Robert, that's part of why we're here today. We've been thinking about your future, about what's best for you." Something in his tone made me set my glass down carefully. I'd heard that voice before in boardrooms, at negotiation tables. It was the voice of someone about to deliver bad news disguised as concern. "My future seems just fine to me," I replied evenly. Emily glanced at her husband, then back at me with those big blue eyes, so much like her mother's. "Dad, we're worried about you living here alone. You're not getting any younger, and this big house, it's a lot to handle." "I manage just fine, but for how long?" Mark cut in sharply. "What happens when you can't climb those stairs anymore, or if you fall and no one's around to help?" The afternoon sunlight streaming through my windows suddenly felt harsh. I studied my son-in-law's face, noting the tightness in his jaw when he talked about my limits, as if my age was a personal burden to him. "I appreciate your concern," I said slowly, "but I'm not ready for a nursing home." "Who said anything about a nursing home?" Emily's laugh was brittle. "We're talking about something much better." Mark pulled a leather portfolio from his briefcase, the kind that screams expensive lawyer or high-end consultant. "We found an excellent assisted living community in Florida. Beautiful weather, great activities, people your own age." "And what about my house?" Mark's smile widened. "That's where our expertise comes in. I have connections in real estate, and Emily and I can handle the sale for you. Take that burden right off your shoulders." The room grew quiet except for the steady ticking of Martha's old grandfather clock. I studied my daughter's face, searching for a trace of the little girl who once helped me in the garden, who cried when she accidentally stepped on ants because she couldn't bear to hurt them. "And my money?" I asked softly. "Your money will be safe," Mark assured me, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the leather portfolio. "In fact, I could invest it for you and double it within a year. I have access to opportunities most people never see." There it was, the real reason for their visit. Not concern for my welfare, not love for the family patriarch, but cold, calculated profit. A twist of heartbreak and anger clenched my chest, a feeling I hadn't felt since Martha's funeral. Emily reached out and took my hand. "Dad, we just want what's best for you. We want you to be comfortable and safe." I squeezed her hand gently, feeling the softness of her skin, the wedding ring Mark had given her, the life she'd built so far from the values I tried to teach her. "I need some time to think about this," I said. Mark's jaw tightened. "Of course, take all the time you need, but don't wait too long, Robert. Opportunities like this don't last forever." After they left, I sat alone in the empty living room as the shadows grew longer. The grandfather clock's steady ticking marked time that suddenly felt far more precious than it had that morning. The next morning dawned rainy, a slow drizzle that made my old bones ache. I'd barely slept, turning yesterday's conversation over in my mind, repeatedly. By the time Emily called at 7:30, I was already dressed and seated at the kitchen table with the morning paper. "Dad, I hope I'm not calling too early. I've been up since 5, sweetheart. You know how it is." Her laugh sounded forced. "Right, of course. Listen, Mark and I talked last night, and we really think this Florida place could be perfect for you. I looked it up online. The facility has a pool, a library, even a workshop where you could tinker with things like you used to." I gazed out the kitchen window at the neighbor's garden. Mrs. Patterson was tending her roses despite the rain. She was 82 and still lived alone. Still drove herself to the grocery store every Thursday. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Dad." "When your mother was sick, what did she tell you about taking care of family?" There was a pause. She said family always comes first." "That's right." "She said we take care of each other, not take from each other." "I don't understand what you mean," she said softly, but I could hear that she understood perfectly. "Your mother left me this house, Emily. She left me my independence. And she taught you better than what you're trying to do here." "Dad, you're being dramatic. We're trying to help you." "No, you're trying to help yourselves." The line was silent except for her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, closer to the daughter I remembered. "Mark says the investment is guaranteed. He says we could all benefit from it." "And what do you say, Emily? What does your daughter say?" "Not Mark's wife. I don't know any more, Dad. Things are complicated. Money's tight, and Mark has these opportunities." "Money's always tight, sweetheart. That's nothing new. What's new is thinking you can fix it by stealing from your father." "We're not stealing, we're just—" "You're just what? Go ahead and say it." She started crying then, soft sobs that took me back to when she was 7 and had broken Martha's favorite vase, the same helpless sound, the same shame. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. But Mark says if we don't do this, if we don't find a way to make more money, we might lose the house in New York. The mortgage payments are crushing us, and his job, the market's been rough." Now we were getting to the truth. "So, you thought you'd solve your problems with my life savings." "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that, Emily. And you know it." I heard Mark's voice in the background, sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out the words. Emily's crying stopped suddenly. "Dad, I have to go. But please just think about what we talked about. Think about your future." "I'm thinking about it, sweetheart, very carefully." After she hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. Martha's photograph on the refrigerator seemed to watch me, her kind eyes reflecting the same disappointment I felt deep inside. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but never imagined I'd have to use. "Read Investigations, Jack speaking." "Jack, it's Robert Thompson. We met at the VFW last year." "Robert, of course. How are you holding up?" "I need your help with something involving my family." "Family's always the toughest cases. You sure about this, Robert?" I looked around my kitchen. The home Martha and I had built together, the life I'd shaped through 50 years of honest work and careful saving. I'm sure, Jack. I think my daughter and her husband are planning to rob me blind. I need to know exactly what they're up to before they do. I'll be over this afternoon. Thank you, Jack. Don't thank me yet. In cases like this, you might not like what I find. As I hung up, I realized I already knew the truth. The question wasn't whether Emily and Mark were trying to cheat me, it was how far they'd go to make it happen. Jack Reed arrived promptly at 3 chess, carrying a worn leather briefcase and the bearing of a man who'd seen too much in his 20 years as a Cleveland police detective. Now, in his 50s, his dark hair threaded with gray, he had the cautious eyes of someone who trusted no one and verified everything. Coffee? I offered as he settled into my living room chair. Black, if you've got it. I poured 2 cups and sat opposite him, noticing how he positioned himself to see both the front door and the hallway to the back. Old habits die hard. Tell me what's going on, Robert. I recounted yesterday's visit, Emily's call that morning, and the gnawing certainty that something was very wrong. Jack listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. The Florida facility, he said when I finished. Did they give you a name? Sunset Gardens. Mark said it's in Tampa. Jack made another note. And the investment opportunity? Did he mention specifics? Just that he could double my money within a year through his connections. Jack's face remained neutral, but I caught a slight tightening around his eyes. Robert, I'll be blunt. What you're describing sounds like a classic setup. The assisted living story gets you out of the way. The power of attorney hands them control over your assets, and the investment scheme makes the money vanish, legally. But Emily's my daughter. She might not even realize she's part of the con. Some of these guys are good at convincing their wives they're legitimate businessmen. Jack opened his briefcase and pulled out a contract. I'm going to need you to sign this, and I'll need a retainer $500 to start, then $50 an hour plus expenses. Without hesitation, I signed and wrote him a check. How long will this take? Give me a week. I'll run background checks on Mark, verify his employment, and investigate this Florida facility. I also arranged some discreet surveillance to uncover their true intentions. People often reveal their real motives when they believe no one is watching. That evening, I called Emily back. My hands trembled not from age, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Dad, I was hoping you'd call. Mark and I have been talking, and I think I've made a decision, Emily. You have? Her voice brightened instantly. I want to see the paperwork, all of it. The Florida facility details, the investment documents, everything. Of course, Mark will be thrilled. He's already preparing the documents. You'll need to sign. Sign documents? Not just review, but papers for you to execute. The distinction wasn't lost on me. When can you bring them over? How about this weekend, Saturday afternoon? Mark wants to go through everything carefully with you. Make sure you understand all the benefits. Saturday sounds fine. Oh, Dad, this is wonderful. You're going to love Florida and the money. Mark says with his contacts, returns could reach 200, maybe more. 200%. The number hung in the air like a cruel joke. In 40 years of working construction and managing crews, I'd never seen a legitimate investment promise anything close. Emily, can I ask you something? Anything, Dad. Do you remember what your mother used to say about deals that sound too good to be true? There was a pause. She said, "She usually are." That's right, sweetheart. She was a smart woman. Dad, are you having second thoughts? Because Mark says... I'm not having second thoughts, Emily. I'm just remembering your mother's wisdom. After hanging up, I walked through my house, truly seeing it for the first time in months. The hardwood floors, Martha and I refinished ourselves. the kitchen where she taught Emily to bake cookies, the living room where we celebrated holidays and shared quiet Sundays reading the paper. They wanted to take all this from me to sell it off and funnel my life savings into a scheme that benefited everyone but the man who'd spent 50 years earning it. But they made a critical mistake. They assumed because I was old, I was helpless. They forgot I'd survived Vietnam, built a business, and raised a family on principles that didn't include stealing from those who loved me. As I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, I found myself almost looking forward to Saturday afternoon. By then, Jack would have begun his investigation, and I'd know exactly who I was dealing with. The grandfather clock chimed 11 times as I reached the top of the stairs, a steady reminder that time was precious, and some had already wasted far too much of mine. Thursday morning, Jack called while I sipped my second cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint my kitchen walls gold. "Robert, you need to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting, Jack." "What did you find?" "Sunset Gardens doesn't exist. The Tampa address is a vacant lot, has been for 2 years. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. And Mark's investment opportunity? Classic Ponzi scheme. I found 3 other families in New York who lost everything to the same pitch. Same promises, same documents, same vanishing act. The pieces clicked in my mind like bullets loading into a rifle chamber. How long has this been going on? At least 18 months, maybe longer. Your daughter might not know the full extent of her husband's crimes, or she might know exactly what she was doing. I had a decision to make. What's our next step? I'm going to record everything on Saturday. I've got equipment that can pick up conversations from 3 rooms away. But Robert, you need to be careful. If they suspect I know something, let me handle it, Jack. These 2 forgot who they're dealing with. Friday dragged on like a week. I cleaned the house twice, organized papers 3 times, and called Martha's grave as I did every Friday, telling her about our daughter's betrayal. The roses I'd planted by her headstone last spring were now blooming bright red against the gray marble. Saturday afternoon arrived with the inevitability of death. Emily's car pulled into my driveway right at 2 hours. Through the windshield, I saw Mark's confident stride. They grabbed their briefcase and manila folders paperwork, disguised as weapons. Jack's surveillance van was parked 3 houses down, masked as a cable repair truck. From my kitchen window, I saw him adjusting his gear inside. The doorbell rang. "Dad." Emily's smile was brighter than usual, almost manic. "Are you ready to start your new life?" Mark brushed past her, carrying his briefcase like a conqueror's banner. "Robert, today's the day we make you rich." They spread their documents across my dining room table with the efficiency of undertakers preparing burial clothes, power of attorney forms, property deeds, investment contracts promising returns that would make lottery winners jealous. "See here," Mark said, pointing with a gold pen. "This gives Emily and me authority to manage your assets while you settle into your new home in Florida. And this," Emily added, her voice trembling slightly, "temporarily transfers the house deed just until we can get the best price." I picked up the power of attorney document, noticing the signature line. My name already filled in, but in someone else's handwriting. The forgery was almost perfect. Almost. "You've both put a lot of work into this." Mark's chest puffed with pride. "I have connections, Robert. People who can make things happen fast and quietly." "I'm sure you do." I set the paper down carefully. "Emily, sweetheart, can you get me a glass of water? This is a lot to process." She jumped up eagerly, desperate to be helpful, as if trying to wash away her gnawing guilt. The moment she left, Mark leaned forward like a shark, sensing blood. "Between you and me, Robert, the sooner we get this done, the better. Emily's worried sick about you living here alone. This benefits everyone, even you." His smile sharpened. I'm going to make sure your money works harder than ever before." Emily returned with my water, her hands shaking slightly as she set it down. "Dad, are you feeling all right? You look pale, just thinking about everything changing so fast." I sipped the water, buying time as they settled into their confidence. "Mark, can you walk me through exactly how this investment works?" For the next 20 minutes, he painted a picture of guaranteed returns, offshore accounts, and connections that would multiply my savings like loaves and fishes. Emily nodded along, relief growing with each lie. Finally, Mark slid a pen across the table. "All we need is your signature, Robert. Right here, here, and here." I picked up the pen, feeling its weight, aware that Jack's equipment was capturing every word. The moment of truth had arrived. "You know what, Mark? I think I need to make a phone call first." His confident smile flickered. "A phone call to who?" I pulled out my old flip phone and dialed 3 numbers. 911. "What's your emergency?" Mark's face went as white as fresh snow. Emily dropped her water glass, shards scattering across the hardwood like fallen stars. "Yes. Hello. I need to report a crime in progress. My name is Robert Thompson, and I'm at 412 Maple Street, Parma. My daughter and son-in-law are attempting to steal my house and life savings with forged documents." "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" "Not physical danger, but they're forcing me to sign fraudulent papers right now." Mark lunged for my phone, but 40 years of construction work had left me stronger than my age suggested. I held it away easily. "Sir, officers are en route. Please stay on the line." Emily was hyperventilating, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streaks. "Dad, what are you doing? We're family." "Family doesn't steal from family, sweetheart." Mark recovered from his shock and scrambled to gather the documents. "This is insane, Robert. You've lost your mind, Emily. We're leaving now." "Actually, you're not." I opened the front door wide, letting the afternoon breeze carry the sound of approaching sirens into my house. Mark froze like a deer caught in headlights, his hands clutching the very papers that could ruin him. "You can't prove anything," he stammered, but his voice no longer carried the earlier confidence. "Can't I?" I retorted, pulling out my phone and scrolling to a recording I'd made earlier that week. "Jack's equipment isn't the only thing recording conversations, Mark." At that moment, the first police cruiser pulled into my driveway, just as my phone began playing the recording aloud. "Emily, we'll just sign for him. The old man won't notice anything, and by the time he does, it'll be too late." Emily's sob cut through the silence like a knife. "Mark, you said we were just helping him." 2 officers approached my front door with calm, measured steps, the kind of men who had seen every form of family betrayal. The older officer's gray temples and tired eyes spoke of years spent witnessing heartbreak. His younger partner looked fresh out of the academy, alert and eager. "Good afternoon, officers. I'm Robert Thompson. I called to report an attempted fraud." Officer Johnson, as his name tag read, took in the chaotic scene, scattered documents, Emily's tear-streaked face, Mark's panicked expression, and my own unusual calm. "Mr. Thompson, can you explain what's happening here?" "My daughter and her husband came today to steal my house and life savings. They brought forged documents and pressured me to sign them." Mark stepped forward, the practiced Wall Street salesman, trying to regain control. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding. My father-in-law is elderly and confused. We're only trying to help him manage his affairs." "I'm 75, not brain dead," I replied evenly. "And I have evidence of their fraud." Officer Smith examined the documents Mark had hastily dropped. "Sir, did you sign any of these papers?" "Not yet, but look at the signature lines. They're already filled in with my name, but the handwriting isn't mine." Johnson held the documents up next to my driver's license. Even from across the room, I could see his frown deepen at the glaring differences. "Mr. Wilson, is it? Can you explain why Mr. Thompson's signature appears pre-written on these forms?" Mark's confidence shattered like thin ice cracking underfoot. That's just a sample signature for reference." "Reference for what?" Emily suddenly found her voice. "Officers, please. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. My father asked us to help him with his finances, and we were just—" My voice cut through her frantic words. "Stop lying. You're already in deep enough trouble." Smith began photographing the documents while Johnson continued his questioning. "Mr. Thompson, you mentioned evidence of fraud. What kind?" I pulled up recordings on my phone. "I have audio of my son-in-law admitting to forging documents and planning to steal my property. I also have photos of similar schemes he's run on other families." Mark's face went from white to ashen gray. "You can't record private conversations without consent. In Ohio, I can record any conversation I'm part of, and since this is my house, I have every right to document what's happening here." Johnson exchanged a knowing glance with Smith. Decades on the force had taught him to recognize guilt when he saw it. "Mr. Wilson, I'm placing you under arrest. You can't arrest me. I have connections. I'll have your badges." But as Johnson snapped the cuffs on, Mark's threat sounded hollow, nothing more than the bluster of a man whose carefully laid plans were crumbling spectacularly. Emily sank into my living room chair, designer clothes rumpled, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. "Dad, I'm sorry. I never wanted this to go this far." I looked at the woman who once was my little girl and felt a fracture open inside me that would never fully heal. "Some things, Emily, can't be undone with apologies." Officer Smith read Mark his Miranda rights just as Jack's surveillance van pulled up on schedule. Through the window I saw Jack step out, carrying his professional recording equipment, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Mark struggled weakly against the handcuffs, flopping like a fish out of water. "This is harassment. I demand to speak to my lawyer immediately." "You'll get your phone call at the station," Johnson replied calmly, clearly used to dealing with men like Mark, wealthy types who think money can buy them out of trouble. Emily sat frozen in my chair, watching her husband's arrest with the hollow stare of someone whose world was crumbling. When Smith approached her with his notebook, she flinched as though he carried a weapon. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions about your involvement in this scheme." I didn't know it was illegal. Mark said we were helping Dad manage his money better." The lie hung in the air like smoke. Even Emily seemed to realize how weak it sounded. I pulled out my phone and played another recording. "Officer, you might want to hear this conversation from 3 days ago." Emily's clear voice filled the room. "Dad, we just want what's best for you. We want you to be comfortable and safe." Then Mark's voice, faint but audible. "Get him to sign everything today. Once we have power of attorney, the old man won't be able to stop us, even if he figures it out." Emily's face crumpled in despair. "Dad, how could you record us? We're family." "Family doesn't steal from family, the life I've worked 50 years to build." Johnson finished with Mark and turned to Emily. "Ma'am, based on what we've heard today, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud." "No, please. I have children to think about." This was all Mark's idea. "Tell it to the judge," Smith said gently, but without any sympathy. As they led Emily to the second police car, she looked back at me one last time. "Dad, please don't let them take me away from my kids. You should have thought about your children before trying to rob their grandfather." Her words hit harder than I expected, but watching her break didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. This was my daughter, the little girl who once helped me build birdhouses in the garage, who fell asleep on my lap as I read her stories. Mark was shoved into the first police car, still shouting about his connections and lawyers. Through the window, I saw him desperately using his one phone call, probably hoping someone on Wall Street would magically erase all this. Emily went more quietly, her shoulders shaking with sobs that reminded me too much of her mother's tears when Martha learned her cancer was terminal. Jack approached as the police cars pulled away, carrying with him what remained of my family's fate. "Robert, you did the right thing." "Did I?" I wondered aloud, staring at the scattered documents on my dining table, the proof of betrayal tangled with the wreckage of my family. I just destroyed my only child's life. She destroyed hers the moment she decided to steal from you. You just refused to be a victim. The neighbor's dog barked at the commotion, and Mrs. Patterson next door stood on her porch, watching the drama unfold with the fascination of someone whose days were usually far quieter. "What happens now?" I asked Jack. "Now the legal system takes over. With the evidence we have, they'll likely plead guilty to avoid trial. Mark could face serious prison time, especially if more victims surface." "And Emily?" Jack shrugged. "First offense, cooperating witness, kids involved. She might get probation." I sank into my chair, feeling every one of my 75 years weigh on me. The house was quiet again, but a different kind of quiet than before. The silence of abandonment, not peace. "You know the worst part, Jack." "What's that?" "I still love her. After all she tried to do, she's still my little girl, and I still love her." Jack gathered the scattered documents, evidence now part of a criminal case. "Love doesn't mean letting people destroy you, Robert. Sometimes love means setting boundaries they don't want to accept." Through my kitchen window, Martha's rose garden bloomed in the afternoon sun. Tomorrow I'd visit her grave and tell her how our daughter chose greed over family, how the girl we raised with hope and pride tried to steal the life we built together. But today, I survived. The old soldier won his final battle, though victory tasted more like ash than triumph. The phone rang, probably a reporter. News about wealthy arrests always spread fast in small towns. I let the phone ring, the sound bouncing through my empty house walls, still adorned with family photos frozen in happier times, when love seemed stronger than money. The Cleveland police station looked far less dramatic by daylight, more bureaucratic than the chaos of yesterday. Detective Thomas White greeted me with a weathered face that spoke of 2 decades spent listening to lies about money, family, and trust. His handshake was firm, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming in. I know yesterday was difficult." We settled into interview room 3, a sterile space lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. I'd brought my folder of documents, organized just as Martha used to arrange her recipe cards, everything in its place. "I want to establish a clear timeline," Detective White said, opening his notebook. "When did you first suspect your daughter and son-in-law were planning to defraud you?" "July 1st, I replied. "The moment they walked in with their Florida fairy tale." He jotted notes carefully. "But you didn't call the police immediately?" "No, I contacted someone better." The door opened and Jack Reed stepped in, carrying a briefcase that looked as heavy as a brick. He placed it on the table with the deliberate care of a man handling evidence that could send people to prison for decades. "Detective White, I'm Jack Reed, private investigator. Mr. Thompson hired me 4 days ago to document this fraud." White raised an eyebrow. 4 days ago? So you've been investigating since July 2nd. "I started background checks immediately," Jack said. Mark Wilson isn't just a failed Wall Street broker. He's a professional con artist. What you saw yesterday was the result of 18 months of financial abuse. Jack opened his briefcase like a surgeon unveiling instruments, bank statements, surveillance photos, typed interview transcripts. The proof of Mark's greed sprawled across the table like a cancer diagnosis. We documented everything, Jack continued. His meeting with Richard Stone, the notary who forged documents for a $10,000 bribe, offshore accounts hiding stolen money, and 3 other families in New York who lost their life savings to identical scams. Detective White examined a photo showing Mark shaking hands with a thin man outside a Cleveland notary's office. You've got this Richard Stone on tape accepting bribes? Audio, video, and a signed confession this morning, Jack confirmed. He's cooperating to avoid federal charges. My throat went dry. How much money are we talking about? Nearly $4 million across all victims, Jack said. The number hung heavy, like smoke from a burning house. 4 million stolen from elderly people who'd spent lifetimes building modest security. People like me who'd survived wars and recessions, who trusted their children to value love more than money. Mr. Thompson, Detective White said, I need you to walk me through yesterday's events again. Every detail counts for the prosecution. For the next hour, I recounted Mark's arrogance, Emily's guilt, and the moment I dialed 911 while forged documents lay across my dining table like marked cards. Jack backed me up with photos, recordings, and financial reports that painted Mark as a predator who weaponized family love. Your daughter, Detective White said cautiously. She's cooperating with us. How? She's provided details about Mark's other scams, his contacts, his methods. She says she didn't realize the full extent of his crimes. Through the interview room's small window, I saw the Cleveland skyline, the city where Martha and I built a life, raised Emily, and believed family was sacred. Now it was the city where my daughter betrayed her husband to save herself from prison. Will she testify against him? Most likely. Her cooperation could reduce her sentence significantly. Jack snapped his briefcase shut with the satisfaction of a job well done. With this evidence, Mark Wilson faces serious federal charges: document forgery, wire fraud, elder abuse across state lines, 7 to 10 years minimum. Detective White gathered his notes. Mr. Thompson, we'll need you available to testify when this goes to trial. When will that be? Probably within a month. Federal prosecutors move fast when the case is this solid. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 75 years. Yesterday I was a victim. Today a witness. Tomorrow a man whose family was destroyed by greed, but whose dignity remained intact. Detective, can I ask something? Of course. In your experience, do families ever recover from something like this? He looked at me with the weary wisdom of someone who'd seen money wreck more relationships than alcohol, drugs, or infidelity. Mr. Thompson, some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, but sometimes that's not such a bad thing. 2 weeks crawled by like wounded animals. The house felt different, not violated exactly, but changed in ways I couldn't name. Every room echoed Saturday's confrontation. Every corner whispered that the daughter I raised had tried to steal everything I built. The phone rang constantly, reporters wanting quotes on family betrayal. Lawyers patiently walked me through the legal steps ahead, while bank officials apologized profusely for almost letting the fraud slip through their fingers. I took some calls, ignored others, and slowly learned to let the noise fade, focusing only on what mattered. Tuesday morning, Jack called with news that made my morning coffee taste like sweet victory. Robert, they raided Mark's New York office yesterday, the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. They seized boxes of evidence, computer servers, everything. What did they find? 4 more victims, all elderly, all conned using variations of the same Florida retirement scam. One couple in Buffalo lost their entire pension, $600,000. Jack's voice grew grave. Mark ran a sophisticated operation, fake websites, professional brochures, even hired actors pretending to be satisfied residents of fake retirement homes. I set down my coffee carefully. Actors? This was all a show? Exactly. Pure, calculated theater designed to steal life savings from hard-working folks who earned their security honestly. Through my kitchen window, I saw Mrs. Patterson tending her garden steady, reliable, the same routine she'd kept for 20 years. The kind of honest life Mark never understood, because he believed clever tricks could replace character. Thursday brought a call from someone I never expected to hear from. Mr. Thompson, this is Assistant District Attorney Lisa Anderson. I'm prosecuting your case and wanted to update you. I'm listening. Emily agreed to testify against her husband in exchange for a lighter sentence. She's provided detailed info on Mark's criminal network names of other victims, evidence of a fraud scheme running for at least 3 years. 3 years? We believe it may go back even further, but records before 2022 were destroyed on purpose. Your son-in-law faces federal charges that could keep him locked up for a decade or more. That afternoon, I drove to the bank where Mark tried to steal from me. Michael Green, the manager, greeted me personally, nervous handshake, endless apologies pouring out. Mr. Thompson, we're deeply sorry. Our security should have caught this immediately. Should have, I said. No, sir, it didn't. As compensation, we're crediting your account with additional interest and waiving all fees related to this incident. Plus, new verification steps are in place to stop this from happening again. He handed me a statement. My account balance read $1,147,192.43. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. Returned with interest, as if Mark's betrayal accidentally made me richer. The irony would have been laughable if I hadn't lost my family. Friday evening, Jack stopped by with a bottle of bourbon and the latest updates. Richard Stone confessed, he said, sinking into Martha's old chair. Mark bribed him for over a year to forge documents across multiple scams. Stone's facing 5 years federally, but will probably serve 3 with good behavior. Other victims are mostly getting their money back. I poured 2 glasses of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the last light like liquid gold. Mark was smart enough to stash stolen money in recoverable accounts, building up to something bigger, probably planning to disappear overseas once he hit a target. How much bigger? I asked. Based on his files, he aimed for 10 million total before vanishing to a country with no extradition. We drank quietly, 2 old men reflecting on the brutal math of betrayal. 8 million stolen from people who trusted their families, banks, and government to protect the security they'd worked their whole lives to build. Jack, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. In all your years investigating fraud, especially within families, do victims ever really recover? He stared into his bourbon as if searching for answers in its amber depths. Financially? Usually, yes. Emotionally? He shrugged. That really depends on the person. Some let betrayal poison every part of their life. Others use it like fertilizer, something painful that helps them grow stronger. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, but the caller's voice stopped us both cold. Dad, it's Emily. Please pick up. I know you're there. The trial is scheduled for next month, and I need to talk to you before then. There are things you don't know, things about Mark. I should have told you years ago. Please, Dad. I'm still your daughter. The voicemail ended, leaving the room thick with silence, heavy like fog. Outside, the evening shadows stretched longer, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 7 times. Jack finished his bourbon and stood up. "That's your decision to make, Robert. But whatever you decide, make sure it's what's best for you, not just what's easiest for her." After he left, I sat alone in my living room, staring at family photos and wondering if love could survive total betrayal or if some wounds were simply too deep for forgiveness to reach. The trial was set for August 9th, just 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to decide if I still had a daughter worth saving, or simply a stranger who shared my blood and had aided a criminal in trying to steal my life. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse stood tall in downtown Cleveland, a limestone monument weathered by decades of rain, snow, and human drama. I wore my best navy suit, the one Emily bought me 5 years ago for her wedding back, when Mark still pretended to be a decent man. The security check felt like airport theater, but I appreciated the metal detectors. Some family betrayals cut deep enough to make people take desperate measures. Courtroom 4B was larger than I'd expected, with tall windows flooding the room with morning light and wooden benches that resembled church pews fitting, since today we were witnessing either the resurrection or burial of what remained of my family. Judge Margaret Cole entered with the air of someone who had spent 20 years sorting truth from lies. Her gray hair was pulled back severely, her black robes crisp as fresh newspaper. She scanned the courtroom with eyes that had seen every kind of human foolishness. "The state of Ohio versus Mark Wilson and Emily Wilson," she announced. "We are here for sentencing following the guilty pleas entered by both defendants." Guilty pleas. They'd avoided trial by confessing. Emily had kept her promise to cooperate fully. I wasn't sure whether to feel proud or disgusted. Mark sat at the defendant's table, looking like a different man. Gone were the expensive suits and confident posture. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely on shoulders that seemed to have shrunk since his arrest. When his eyes flicked toward the gallery, they found mine for a brief moment before darting away like a guilty dog. Emily sat apart, her lawyer whispering last-minute instructions. She looked fragile in a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly, makeup minimal. This was Emily trying to appear sympathetic, remorseful, worthy of mercy. The performance might have worked if I hadn't seen her rehearse similar acts my entire life. Prosecutor Lisa Anderson stood to address the court, younger than I expected, maybe 35, with the confident bearing of someone who had built her career on cases exactly like this one. "Your Honor, the defendants orchestrated a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting elderly victims across multiple states. Mr. Mark Wilson led this operation, stealing over $4 million from senior citizens who trusted him with their life savings. Mrs. Emily Wilson aided and abetted these crimes by helping her husband gain access to her father, Robert Thompson, who is present in court today." Judge Cole looked directly at me. "Mr. Thompson, would you like to make a victim impact statement?" I rose slowly, feeling the weight of the moment, the finality of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about whether family bonds could survive total betrayal. "Your Honor, I served my country in Vietnam. I buried my wife of 40 years. I've survived recessions, job losses, and more challenges than most people face in a lifetime. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own daughter tried to steal everything I worked to build." My voice carried clearly throughout the courtroom. In the gallery, I saw reporters taking notes, other victims of Mark's schemes nodding quietly in recognition. The money can be returned, my house can be secured, but the trust between a father and daughter, once broken by greed, can never be fully repaired. That's the real crime here. Not just theft of assets, but theft of love, family, and the security that comes from believing your children will care for you rather than exploit you. I sat down to respectful silence. Judge Cole made a few notes before addressing the defendants. Mr. Wilson, you have pleaded guilty to federal charges of wire fraud, document forgery, and elder financial abuse. The evidence shows a pattern of predatory behavior targeting some of our most vulnerable citizens. You exploited family relationships and violated positions of trust for personal gain. Mark's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client is prepared to make full restitution and has cooperated completely with federal investigators to help recover funds stolen from other victims. Cooperation noted, Judge Cole replied curtly. However, the scope and sophistication of these crimes demands significant consequences. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised probation and full restitution to all victims. 8 years. Mark would be 53 when he got out. His Wall Street career finished, his reputation destroyed, his marriage almost certainly dissolved. He absorbed the sentence with the blank expression of someone whose worst fears had been confirmed. Mrs. Wilson, Judge Cole continued, your cooperation with authorities and your status as a first-time offender weigh in your favor. However, you participated in the financial abuse of your own father, which represents a particularly egregious violation of family trust. Emily started crying before the judge finished speaking. Real tears this time, not performance tears, the kind that came from understanding that consequences were inescapable. I sentence you to 2 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, specifically working with elderly victims of financial crimes, and a requirement to pay restitution of $50,000 to a fund supporting elder abuse prevention programs. No jail time for Emily. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt cheated. Court adjourned with the mechanical efficiency of justice served. Mark was led away in handcuffs, his shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or might have been rage. Emily approached me as the courtroom emptied. Her face streaked with tears that looked genuine. Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know, Emily. I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. You made your choices. I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences. Does that mean you'll never forgive me? I looked at this woman who carried my blood in Martha's eyes, but had chosen greed over family, betrayal over love. The answer wasn't simple because forgiveness never is. It means I'm still deciding whether the daughter I raised is worth forgiving, or if she died the day you brought those forged papers to my house. I walked away from her then, leaving her standing alone in the courthouse lobby, with the weight of her choices and the echoes of justice rendered. Outside, Cleveland's summer heat hit me like a wall, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that courtroom. Justice had been served. My money was safe. Mark would spend the next 8 years learning that cleverness without character eventually destroys itself. But as I walked down those courthouse steps toward whatever came next, I carried the knowledge that some victories cost more than defeats, and some family wounds never fully heal. They just stop bleeding and leave scars that remind you to be more careful about who you trust with your heart. The drive home from the courthouse took me through neighborhoods I'd known for 40 years, past the bakery where Martha bought birthday cakes, past the hardware store where I'd purchased tools to build Emily's tree house. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing it through different eyes, the eyes of a man who'd won a war but lost his family in the process. My house sat exactly where I'd left it. White siding bright in the afternoon sun, Martha's rose bushes blooming with defiant beauty despite everything that had happened within those walls. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, keys in my hand, processing the strange feeling of coming home to a place that was mine again. Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden next door when I stepped out of the car. She dropped her hose and hurried over with the excitement of someone who'd been waiting weeks to have this conversation. Robert, we saw it on the news. 8 years for that awful man and your daughter cooperating with the police. You must feel vindicated. Vindicated? I tested the word like wine that might have turned sour. That's one way to put it, Martha. Well, you showed everyone that just because we're older doesn't mean we're easy targets. My grandson called last night to check on my finances after seeing your story on Channel 5. Inside my house, everything was exactly as I'd left it, but somehow different. The dining room table, where Mark had spread his forged documents, now looked like a battlefield after the war had ended. The living room chair, where Emily had cried, still seemed to hold the faint trace of her tears. I moved through each room carefully, reclaiming spaces that hadn't truly been taken, but had certainly felt violated. In my bedroom, I opened the safe where I kept important documents, relieved to find everything untouched. Mark had been so confident in his forgeries that he hadn't even bothered to search for the real papers. At 4 p.m., the phone rang. It was Michael Green from the bank, his voice a mixture of professional relief and institutional embarrassment. Mr. Thompson, I have excellent news. Your account has been fully restored to $1,247,000, which includes compensation for the inconvenience and additional interest accrued during the investigation. More money than I'd ever seen in one place, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, travel anywhere, buy anything I wanted. But sitting alone in my living room, surrounded by family photos that now felt like evidence from a crime scene, I realized money without people to share it with was just numbers on a statement. Mr. Green, I appreciate everything the bank has done to make this right. Is there anything else we can do for you, sir? Perhaps arrange enhanced security or a financial advisor to assist you. I'll let you know if I need anything. After hanging up, the house settled into its familiar evening quiet. I made a simple dinner, washed the dishes, and sat down with the newspaper. Normal tasks in a house that felt anything but normal. At 7:30, the front doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I saw Frank Conover from the VFW Post, carrying a casserole dish and wearing the determined expression of a man on a mission. Frank, what brings you by? I heard about the trial on the Veterans Network. Figured you might need some company and a decent meal. He set the tuna noodle casserole, my late wife's recipe, on the kitchen counter with military precision. And before you say you're fine, remember we've all been through battles where victory doesn't feel much like celebration. We ate at my kitchen table, two old soldiers who understood that sometimes the hardest fight comes after the shooting stops. You did right, Robert. Family or not, you can't let people steal your dignity along with your money. Doesn't make it hurt less. No, but it makes it honorable hurt instead of stupid hurt. After Frank left, I sat alone with my thoughts and the weight of 3 million that suddenly felt less like wealth and more like responsibility. Outside my kitchen window, evening shadows grew longer, and a distant church bell chimed 9 times. I picked up my phone and dialed directory assistance. What city? Cleveland. I need the number for the Veterans Crisis Support Center. Connecting you now. Veterans Support. This is Jim. How can I help you? Jim, my name is Robert Thompson. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I want to make a substantial donation to help homeless veterans. That's wonderful, sir. May I ask what inspired this generosity? I looked around my reclaimed house, at the photos of a family that no longer existed, and at the victory that felt more like survival than triumph. Let's just say I learned the difference between having a house and having a home, and I want to help other veterans avoid sleeping on the street. The Veterans Support Center was a converted warehouse on Cleveland's east side, its brick facade worn but welcoming. I'd driven past dozens of times without really seeing it, the way you ignore things until they become personal. Jim McAllister greeted me at the door, a man in his 50s with the bearing of someone who'd served overseas, and the compassion of someone who understood that battles don't always end when you come home. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming. When you mentioned a substantial donation last night, I have to admit I was curious about the amount. $300,000. He stopped walking and stared, as if I'd just announced I was donating a spaceship. 300, sir. That's enough to house and feed veterans for an entire year, enough to change lives. That's the idea." He led me through the facility, past dormitory-style rooms where veterans struggled to find shelter, to a common room where a man about my age was teaching a younger veteran how to fill out job applications. Mark, my former son-in-law, threatened to put me in a place like this if I didn't go along with his scheme. It seemed fitting to turn that threat into something positive. We completed the paperwork in Jim's modest office, surrounded by thank-you letters from veterans who'd gotten back on their feet with the center's help. As I signed the donation check, I felt something I hadn't in years: the satisfaction of helping someone else's life get better. "Mr. Thompson, this donation will allow us to expand transitional housing. Veterans won't just have emergency shelter. They'll have time and support to rebuild their lives." Driving home, I realized the house wasn't quite as empty as it had felt yesterday, though still too quiet, filled with echoes of conversations that would never happen again. The Cuyahoga County Animal Shelter stood on the outskirts of town, a low building surrounded by chain-link fencing and the hopeful barks of dogs waiting for second chances. I hadn't planned to stop, but a sign advertising senior dog adoptions caught my eye. "Looking for anything in particular?" the volunteer asked at the front desk. "Something that needs a home as much as I need company." She led me to the senior dog section, where older dogs waited patiently, their gray muzzles and slower movements belying their gentle spirits. "This is Buddy," she said, stopping at a kennel containing a golden retriever mix with cloudy eyes and a calm expression. "He's 8 years old, house-trained, great with people. His previous owner passed away, and the family couldn't keep him." Buddy looked up at me with the quiet wisdom of a soul who had learned that life sometimes brings unexpected changes, but that hope for kindness never fades. "Can I walk him?" 15 minutes later, Buddy and I were sitting in my car, both of us adjusting to the reality of this sudden partnership. He settled comfortably into the passenger seat, as if he'd finally found what he was searching for. Back home, Buddy explored the house with gentle curiosity, while I set out his food and water bowls in the kitchen. His presence changed the atmosphere. Footsteps, breathing, and the occasional jingle of his dog tags created a new soundtrack of companionship. The mailman brought a thick envelope bearing Emily's return address and handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Inside were 3 pages of carefully penned script, evidently written and rewritten multiple times. "Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just sorry we got caught, but sorry I ever believed money was more important than your trust. Mark convinced me we were helping you, that you'd thank us later when your investments made you rich. Now I see how foolish and wrong that was." I read the letter twice while Buddy dozed quietly at my feet. Emily described her financial ruin, the collapse of her marriage, and her desperate struggle to find work with a criminal record. She begged for forgiveness, promised to repay every penny, and swore she'd learned hard lessons about greed and family loyalty. At the bottom of the 3rd page, she wrote, "I know I have no right to ask this, but could you ever forgive me? Not for my sake, but because I can't bear the thought of you dying alone and angry." I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into a drawer with other documents I might need someday, but didn't want to revisit often. Then I reached down to scratch Buddy's ears, savoring the simple joy of unconditional companionship. "What do you think, boy?" Some mistakes are too big for forgiveness, and some people wait too long to discover what really matters. Buddy thumped his tail softly against the floor, offering the kind of wordless comfort money couldn't buy and family had failed to provide. At 8:02 the phone rang. It was Sarah Campbell from the Cleveland paper, her voice bright with the enthusiasm of a reporter who'd found a story worth telling. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you don't mind my calling. We'd like to do a feature about your case. Not just the legal aspects, but what it says about family, trust, and fighting back against elder abuse." I glanced down at Buddy, who watched me with patient intelligence, and realized maybe my story was bigger than personal betrayal and legal victory. "Miss Campbell, when would you like to talk?" The newspaper photographer adjusted his camera while I sat in my living room chair, Buddy loyally at my feet. Sarah reviewed her notes one last time. Her questions aimed to capture not just facts, but the deeper meaning of the ordeal. "Mr. Thompson, when you first suspected your daughter and son-in-law were trying to defraud you, what went through your mind?" "Disbelief, then disappointment, then determination." I'd spent my life teaching Emily about integrity and family loyalty. When she chose greed over those values, I realized I had to choose, be a victim or be a fighter. Sarah's pen moved swiftly across her notepad. "You hired a private investigator before contacting the police. That shows remarkable foresight." "Military training never really leaves you," I replied. "You assess the threat, gather intelligence, then engage the enemy. In this case, the enemy wore familiar faces." The interview went on for 2 hours, covering everything from my Vietnam service to Martha's death, and finally to the moment I dialed 911 with forged documents spread across my dining room table. Sarah asked thoughtful questions that helped me see my own story more clearly. "What advice would you give to other elderly people facing similar situations?" she asked. "Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is, even if it's family causing the harm. Document everything. Get professional help. And remember, age only makes you helpless if you let it." The following week, Channel 5 News called for a television interview for their senior advocacy segment. Then the Veterans Organization invited me to speak at their monthly meeting about financial security for aging members. Standing at the podium in the VFW hall, looking out at faces marked by military service and civilian struggles, I felt the weight of representing more than just my own experience. Brothers and sisters, we've fought enemies overseas. Now, we face different enemies at home, people who see our age as weakness, our trust as opportunity, and our life savings as their personal jackpot. But we didn't survive war and build lives just to hand everything over to con artists wearing family faces. The applause was warm, but what mattered most were the conversations afterward. 3 veterans privately shared stories of financial manipulation by children, caretakers, and supposed advisors. "Robert," said Bill McCarthy, a Korean war vet, "my nephew tried to talk me into signing over my house last month. After hearing your story, I told him to take a long walk off a short pier." Driving home, I realized my personal battle had grown into a warning for others, a reminder that self-defense doesn't end at 75. The feature story in the Cleveland paper ran Sunday morning, complete with photos of me and Buddy and a sidebar on recognizing elder financial abuse. By Monday afternoon, 17 calls came from people sharing stories, asking for advice, and thanking me for speaking out. Tuesday brought a call from a national news producer interested in featuring my case in a series on elder abuse. Wednesday, a law enforcement group requested permission to use my story as training material for officers. "Buddy," I said, scratching behind his ears on the porch as evening settled over the neighborhood, "looks like our little family drama turned into a public service announcement." The attention was flattering but overwhelming. I wasn't comfortable being famous for surviving my daughter's greed, but I knew the publicity might help others spot similar threats. Emily called Thursday evening. Her voice was small, distant. "Dad, I saw the newspaper article. I'm glad you're helping others, but having our family's private business all over the front page." "Emily, our family business went public the moment you and Mark forced me into this mess. I didn't choose this attention, but I'm not wasting it. Will you ever forgive me?" I looked at Buddy, who watched patiently. An animal that understood some questions have no simple answers. "Forgiveness isn't a one-time gift, sweetheart. It's a journey we both have to work on. Right now, I'm focused on healing from what you did, not making you feel better." A silence stretched between us like a bridge we didn't know how to cross. "I understand," she whispered. "I hope someday." "Someday is a long way off, Emily. Maybe focus on today and making better choices." After she hung up, I sat on the porch with Buddy until the stars came out over Cleveland. Somewhere across town, my daughter lived with the cost of choosing money over family. Somewhere in federal prison, Mark learned that cleverness without character destroys itself. And here, in a house finally mine again, an old soldier discovered that the best victory isn't the one that gives you everything you want, but the one that teaches you what truly matters. The phone rang less often. Interview requests slowed, but the impact grew unseen. Other elders spotting con artists, families having hard talks about money and trust, victims finding courage to fight instead of surrender. Maybe that's what justice really is. Not just punishment for the guilty, but protection for the innocent who come after. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.